Hello and welcome to E39 Source. Ryan Schultz here with my 2000 M5 and 2002 330xi. We're working on the dark blue car today, installing some tie rods, some steering rack bellow kits, and I suppose that's it, but it's going to be a fun job here today. I had these wheels off not a month ago and found that the boot over here is torn, and I'm kind of diagnosing a very weird feeling steering rack. Between turning left and right, it gets heavy and then light and heavy and then light. The double U-joint link in there doesn't look too terrible, so we're going to start with these tie rods here today. I'd like to start out by giving a big thanks to FCP Euro for making today's video possible. They offer a lifetime warranty on every single part they sell. That's right, including oil, usable suspension components, air filters. You buy them, you use them, they fail or wear out, you buy another one, send the other one back, and you are refunded for that part. So be sure to check out FCP Euro for all genuine and OEM, you name it, BMW parts. Today we're using Lemforder for the tie rods, both of them, and we're doing the whole tie rod, not just the outer tie rod, all the way to the rack. Then we went with Phoebe Bilstein here for the bellows, which are the boots and the clips that keep grease in and dirt out. So we'll go through a couple of the parts here with part numbers. So this is going to be for your 325 and 330xi. The four-wheel drive cars are different. These are your four-wheel drive parts. As you can see, that part number there is 32106774319. There's your right tie rod. Your left tie rod is the same thing, but it's a 318 at the end. That'll be everything you need for your tie rods. The Lemforder parts come with the locking nuts. If you buy a different brand that maybe don't come with the locking nuts, there are the locking nut part numbers, 32216769539. Moving into the bellow kits, this comes with the boot and then a clip on each end. The part numbers here are the same for each side. It's 32136752478. Looking at some tools we're going to be using. I just laid out a fairly wide variety of things. We can get more later if we need them. I've got a hammer. We've got a big old adjustable wrench here. The end of the tie rod here, that is a 34 millimeter. You're going to need a 34 mil open-ended wrench. I don't have one that large, so we're going to try this. We're going to need a 19 millimeter wrench for these lock bolts at the top. Those are 19s. Your center counterhold point is a H5, a hex 5 socket. I've got these funky looking pliers here that we're going to be using on the clips on these bellows. We'll see if they work. I have a 3/8 adjustable or a 3/8 ratchet here for our 5 mil for that, and then some various sockets for getting the wheels off. That's a 17 millimeter. I've got a 3/8 torque wrench and a half drive torque wrench. So we're going to jack this car up to start with. Before you do that, make sure it's in gear or park with the parking brake on. We're going to use the center jack point, which is back maybe 24 inches on the subframe. It's got a little black pad on it. We want to be sure to use that. Before we get the car in the air, let's break these wheel lug bolts free. They're 17 millimeter, use a 6-point, and then use some good safe jack stands. These are Pittsburgh 6-ton jack stands that we're going to use to support the car. So we ended up removing the front portion of the belly pan first. It's held on with a few fasteners. We can see some rusty screws. There's Phillips, 3 there, 4, 5, and 6. They're quarter turn, you don't have to release them all the way. In the very front, there's 2 very typical BMW pop rivets. You pull out that center with a pry tool, something like that, and then the rest comes with it. So we get that out of the way. We push the jack back to the secondary jacking point. We use the one all the way back there. It's just a tubular piece of steel behind the engine. It's wrong about the little pad. The E39s have the pad, the E46 doesn't. So we jack it from there. We put our stands here at the jack points. We already had the lugs loosened. We can take the lugs out and take the wheel off. So we went ahead and did the driver's side to familiar ourselves with the process. We're now moving on to the passenger side. You want your wheels turned all the way to the right. If you put your key in position 1, then turn it off, but don't take it out. That will loosen up the steering and unlock it. Then the first thing we've been doing is taking the tie rod off the wheel carrier, the spindle here. Whatever tie rods are on this vehicle, it uses an 18 millimeter locking nut, and is that a 4 or 5 millimeter?
This is a 5 and it's not fitting, so it's
probably a 4. So whatever we're taking off is slightly smaller. The new parts we have are a 19 and a 5. This might be an 18 and a 4. I recommend some penetrating oil on that lock nut. Preferably when you get the wheels off, just hit both sides with that penetrating oil, so you don't have to worry about that later. And then we're using the 5 millimeter to counter hold from the inside, And then an open-ended wrench, again, this is an 18, yours might be a 19. Whatever kind of tie rods you're taking off will be the difference. We're using a nice big extension here to clear the brake dust shield. Just gonna hold that ball joint in place and spin that nut off. If you can't tell, we had an absolute blast getting this side of the tie rod off of the carrier. I don't know why it was so much more difficult than the other side. We ended up cutting it, bashing it off with a hammer, whatever, it's done. Now we move on to the existing boot. With the wheels turned all the way to the right, that's going to help, not necessarily with the boot, but with getting the entire tie rod assembly off the rack. It just pushes the whole assembly out several inches. So this boot is held on with zip ties. I think the factory connectors are those kind of one-time use metal clips that you need the special pliers for. We're using just a pair of wire cutters to cut the zip ties off and then cut it all the way along the rest of the tie rod. And then unfortunately it's kind of difficult to see and work all the way back where the other end of that boot connects into the steering rack. And we found no easy way to use the BMW clips back there. We just used another thick heavy-duty zip tie. Make sure that it gets tightened down correctly. You can use a ball joint tool if you want, separating it from the carrier here. These parts are garbage. I don't think it's worth that. When you get the nut off, just take a hammer, a mallet, and just bash it out. Just make sure you don't hit anything else in here. When you slide the boot out of the way, that reveals the far end of the tie rod there where it meets the rack. It's a 34 mil. We're using the adjustable wrench. So we're gonna put that on there, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It's gonna take quite a bit of leverage, and eventually that will spin off. So for whatever reason, this side was much easier than the other side. As you can see, it's just going to spin maybe 10 or 15 revolutions, and then we'll have the old tie rod removed. So there's our new boot. It's easier said than done to put this sucker in. You pretty much just grab the old one and yank it off. Whatever connector's left, you'll just cut or remove. No two of these are going to be alike. You know, I've got zip ties in here. Who knows what you've got? So then take your new boot. It's got a small end and a large end. The large end goes on the rack. The small end will affix to the tie rod itself. And you're supposed to use the included clips, which comes with two, a slightly larger one and a slightly smaller one. You're supposed to use that bigger one back there. But just due to the angles in here, there's no way you can get your tool for this on there. So I used a very heavy-duty, thick zip tie. It takes quite a bit of finagling to get this boot up over the rack, as this is about the same size as the rack, and you have to stretch it, and there's no way you can get any closer in there unless you drop your subframe. So just keep working with it. You can get a little aggressive with this rubber. Don't stick any tools or anything in there, because once you puncture this, your new tie rod's not going to last. So get it sandwiched over the rack. Use a zip tie, make sure it sits in this outermost channel here, tighten it down. Now we're ready to take our new tie rod. It's going to thread in here, and we're going to put that down nice and tight. The tie rod threads into the rack. Don't cross thread it, that would suck. Now that it's in there and tight, I think about 30 pounds is the spec for this. I don't know how you'd torque it. We're doing at least 30 pounds by hand here. So now we've got the boot. We need to affix the boot to the tie rod on the outer end. It comes with this little donut piece with a line in it, opens up like that. We're going to take that right on the tie rod and put it in that little collar like that. We then bring the boot out, sandwich it over the donut, and we have enough room to work here. You could use a durable zip tie if that's your thing, or we'll use the included clip, and we'll show you how that works in a moment once we get that fitted on there. So fit it on there like that, then you'll find the little protrusion part that sticks out right there as indicated by the thumb. I'll leave a link to these pliers down below. I did not have this tool, I had to buy it. And it'll be something I imagine I use in the future. They're kind of just axle boot.
CV boot clamp pliers.
Yeah, something along those lines. So we get it lined up like that.
And squeeze.
And squeeze. And you may have to go twice. These are certainly a one-use fastener. It's metal instead of plastic like a zip tie, so you've got that going for you. And you cinch it down and it kind of sticks out like that, but
it's very secure.
That's not going anywhere. For the ball joint end, that is totally flexible. When you first hit it, it may be a little difficult to move, but once you get it moving, it'll be fine. You'll want to clean out that bore as best you can with some PB Blaster, shop towel, whatever. Get it nice and clean. You're going to push that up there. You're going to thread your nut on.
New locking nut.
New locking nut for sure. Don't use an existing one. You're going to thread it on by hand as far as you can. As you get it tighter, you can put a wrench on it. When you put a wrench on it, an open-ended wrench 19, you're going to notice that the whole ball joint spins. It means we need to counterhold it like we did removing it. This one is a H5 at the top of the
Or just
shaft.
Hex 5.
Hex 5. So we got the ball joint into the spindle here, and you're going to torque this down to 48 foot-pounds. That's 65 Newton meters if you prefer that unit. So we started it by hand. As it got tight, we counter-held it. As it got real tight, you can just put a 6-point socket on there, and the ball joint won't spin at that point, and torque that down. You want to make sure that this is at 48 pounds. Again, we were at about 33, 35 in there. There's really no good way to measure that unless you're a true shop. And otherwise we're good. When we had the old tie rod off and before we put the new one on, you want to line these things up all the way. And this locking, these nuts here, you can loosen, turn. You want them to be exactly the same size or as close. You need to do an alignment after this job. But get them as close as you can just by the end of the ball joint to the end of the nut that we put down on the rack. We're now ready to put the wheel back on. So we still have the steering wheel unlocked, I think, so we can just give that a big push, put our wheel on, star pattern on the torquing, and we're gonna go down to 89 foot-pounds of torque. Hey, fast forward a few hours, we had those wheels torqued down to 89 pounds. We waited for a rainstorm to make its way through Ohio, and we went for a drive. And the steering, I'm very happy to report, the steering feels much better. Night and day difference, feels normal now. It's linear, it's tight, there's no play. I am gonna have to do the alignment. I have to steer right to go left, and that's no good, or to go straight, and that's no good. So we'll get that taken care of, but that is the tie rod install on an E46 XI chassis. That's your 325 and 330 XI. And again, another big thanks to FCP Euro for making this video possible. I'll talk to you guys in the next E39 Source video. Take care.